What's up, Canadian Insights crew? Welcome back to the channel where we break down the Great White Norse political circus one eyebrow-raising headline at a time. Today we're talking about something that's as Canadian as maple syrup and passive-aggressive politeness, and no, I'm not talking about apologizing to furniture we bump into. We're diving into the world of agricultural trade wars, political optimism, and a Prairie Premier who's basically sending the new Prime Minister off to China with a hopeful wave and crossed fingers like a parent dropping their kid off at their first job interview. Scott Moe just publicly stated his thrilled Mark Carney is heading to China next week, and honestly the subtext here is so thick you could spread it on toast. Buckle up because we're about to unpack why Saskatchewan's canola farmers are sweating bullets, why this trip matters more than your average diplomatic handshake photo op, and whether Carney can actually pull off what would essentially be an economic miracle. Let's get into it. So here's the situation, and it's messier than a Tim Hortons lineup during the morning rush. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe took to social media, because of course he did, that's where all political discourse happens now apparently, to express his excitement about Prime Minister Mark Carney's upcoming visit to China. Now before you think this is just some friendly international relations fluff piece, let me hit you with the context that makes this actually fascinating. Chinese tariffs have been absolutely demolishing Prairie canola exports since spring. And when I say demolishing I mean taking a sledgehammer to an industry that's worth billions to the Canadian economy. We're talking about farmers who've built their entire livelihoods around this crop, watching their markets evaporate faster than water on a hot Saskatchewan summer day, and trust me, those get hot enough to fry an egg on a sidewalk. Moe's statement is essentially the political equivalent of saying, hey, I really hope you can fix this catastrophic problem that's been destroying our agricultural sector for months now, good luck buddy. There's optimism there, sure, but there's also this underlying desperation that you can practically taste. Saskatchewan's economy leans heavily on agriculture, like really heavily. We're talking about a province where canola isn't just a crop, it's basically a cultural identity. When canola farmers hurt, the whole province feels it, and when the whole province feels it, premiers start making very public statements about how much they'd really appreciate some federal government intervention. It's the Canadian way of screaming for help while maintaining a polite smile. Now let's talk about why China slapped these tariffs on Canadian canola in the first place, because this isn't just random economic aggression for funsies. The relationship between Canada and China has been about as smooth as a gravel road for years now, and if you've been following along you know exactly why. We've got the whole Meng Wanzhou Huawei executive detention saga that happened back in the day, the two Michaels who were held in China as apparent retaliation, and a general vibe between our countries that screams we're smiling in the photos but we absolutely cannot stand each other. China's tariffs on Canadian canola have been widely interpreted as part of this ongoing diplomatic Cold War, and the timing couldn't be worse for Prairie farmers who are already dealing with climate unpredictability, rising costs, and all the fun challenges that come with modern agriculture. Here's where it gets spicy though. Mark Carney just became Prime Minister relatively recently, and is walking into this China situation like someone who showed up to a house party after the cops have already been called twice. The relationship is strained, the trust is basically non-existent, and he's supposed to just waltz in and negotiate better trade terms? That's like asking someone to defuse a bomb they didn't build with instructions written in a language they're still learning. But here's the thing, Carney isn't your typical career politician. He's got this whole former Bank of Canada governor, former Bank of England governor, international finance wizard background that theoretically makes him the kind of person who could navigate complex economic negotiations. Whether that translates to actually getting China to back off on canola tariffs though, that's the multi-billion-dollar question. Scott Moe's hope that Carney can make progress on market access is honestly kind of touching in a watch your buddy try something impossible while you cheer them on sort of way. Because let's be real here, advancing market access with China right now is about as easy as teaching a moose to tap dance. China holds all the cards, they know Canadian farmers are hurting, and they're not exactly motivated to play nice when the broader Canada-China relationship is still frosty enough to preserve a woolly mammoth. But Moe's putting on a brave face because what else is he going to do? Publicly declare that he thinks the trip is pointless? That would go over about as well as suggesting we get rid of hockey, so instead he's taking the optimistic route and hoping for the best. What makes this whole situation even more interesting is the political dynamic at play. Moe is a provincial premier from Saskatchewan, a province that leans pretty conservative in case you hadn't noticed, and Carney is a Liberal Prime Minister. These aren't exactly natural political allies, yet here we are with Moe publicly expressing support for Carney's diplomatic efforts. That tells you how serious this canola situation really is. When political rivals are setting aside their differences and actually rooting for each other, you know the stakes are legitimately high. It's like watching cats and dogs form an alliance against a common enemy, except the enemy is economic hardship and the alliance is held together by agricultural desperation and Western Canadian stubbornness. The farmers themselves are watching all this unfold with what I can only imagine is a mixture of hope and skepticism. These are people who've been dealing with the fallout of these tariffs for months, watching prices drop, watching markets close, and trying to figure out how to keep their operations viable when one of their biggest customers suddenly decided to make their product significantly less competitive. They've heard the political promises before, they've seen the diplomatic meetings that amount to nothing, and now they are supposed to believe that this trip is going to be different? You can't blame them for being a bit jaded. It's like being told for the 10th time that your significant other is definitely going to change this time. Sure, maybe they will, but you've heard that before. But here's why this trip actually might matter more than previous attempts at smoothing things over. Carney represents fresh leadership, a new face that China hasn't been directly dealing with in the context of these specific tensions. Sometimes in international relations that matters more than we'd like to admit. It's the political equivalent of bringing in a new mediator when negotiations have stalled. There's no baggage, no history of failed promises, just a clean slate and the possibility of approaching old problems with new strategies. Will it work? Who knows, but it's at least a different approach than sending the same people to have the same conversations that lead to the same disappointing results. The broader implications here extend way beyond just canola and Saskatchewan. This is about Canada's ability to maintain and rebuild crucial trade relationships in an increasingly complicated global landscape. China is a massive market, and when that market closes its doors to Canadian products, whether it's canola, lumber, or anything else, it sends ripples through our entire economy. If Carney can make genuine progress in China on the canola issue, it signals that maybe Canada can start repairing this fractured relationship more broadly. If he can't, well then we're looking at continued economic pain for prairie farmers and a reinforcement of the idea that Canada-China relations are fundamentally broken for the foreseeable future. Scott Moe's public statement of hope is also a bit of political insurance for himself. If Carney succeeds, Moe can point to his support and say, see, we worked together and got results. If Carney fails, Moe can pivot to, well, we tried to be supportive but the federal government still couldn't deliver for Saskatchewan farmers. It's political chess in real time, where every public statement serves multiple purposes and nothing is quite as straightforward as it seems. Welcome to Canadian politics, where even expressions of hope come with strategic considerations and backup plans. The reality is that these next few weeks are going to be absolutely crucial for prairie agriculture and for anyone who cares about Canada's economic future. Carney's trip to China isn't just a diplomatic courtesy call, it's a high-stakes mission with real consequences for real people whose livelihoods depend on these markets being accessible. The pressure is on, the expectations are mixed, and everyone from premiers to farmers to average Canadians who just want their country to thrive economically are watching to see what happens next. So there you have it, folks, the saga of Scott Moe hoping Mark Carney can work some trade negotiation magic in China while Saskatchewan farmers hold their collective breath. It's optimism meets desperation meets political necessity, all wrapped up in one very Canadian package. Will Carney pull it off? Can he actually advance market access for canola and give prairie farmers something to celebrate? Or are we looking at another chapter in the ongoing story of Canada-China relations being about as functional as a screen door on a submarine? Time will tell. If you found this breakdown helpful and you want to stay updated on all the political drama, economic twists, and genuinely important stories shaping Canada right now, smash that subscribe button because we're posting new content constantly and you're not going to want to miss what comes next. Drop a comment below with your predictions. Do you think Carney can actually make progress in China, or is this trip just political theater? Let's discuss. Hit that like button if you appreciate us breaking down these complex issues without putting you to sleep, and share this with anyone who needs to understand why prairie farmers are watching the news more closely than usual these days. I'm Canadian Insights, this has been your dose of political reality, and I'll catch you in the next one. Stay informed, stay skeptical, and for the love of all that is holy, stay curious. Peace.